Welcome to Rooted Within with Lili and Dan, a podcast that shines a spotlight on positive change makers sharing their stories of legacy, inspiration, and impact.
Nikki, so good to have you in the studio.
Thank you for having me. I'm actually really proud of myself for getting here. I know that we said the parking would be dodgy, but holy...
Oh, it's the parking's really dodgy around
I've
here.
actually left my car down at a wee mall somewhere.
Yeah. What I don't even know what a mall is around here.
Pavilion.
I think the
Pavilion, yes, I get it. Yeah, and then walk.
Then I got a taxi.
It's like
It was
a million
like
degrees outside.
6 dirhams.
So anyway, we digress. Welcome to our studio.
Thank you
We had
for
a great
having me.
conversation on the phone a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, we did.
And you were talking about something that's quite relevant. We've had a couple of guests now which have been talking about motherhood and life and children and that whole journey.
Yeah.
And we were talking about postnatal depression, but you've looked at redefining postnatal depression.
Yeah, I'm trying.
So I'm going to throw that over to you so you can kickstart and give us a bit of an update.
Trying to redefine it. I think when you start talking about like postpartum or maternal mental health, people kind of shut down, right? And it's, it's still got a barrier there. So it's redefining it and letting people understand that even though I dive right into it, it's not always so dark and depressing. There's actually
But it
a hope.
sounds so dark and
does.
depressing when you say
So
postnatal
people,
depression.
are resistant to talking about it because they think that. But what I'm trying to say is, but I can help. And I now understand a lot of stuff and I've experienced things so you don't have to. So I can share some nuggets. And sometimes it's the most simple things, right?
Well, first of all, you've reframed it.
Yeah.
What do you call it?
I call it maternal mental health.
I really like that.
Yeah, because it seems a bit more inclusive of the entire journey rather than that kind of post giving birth element.
Yeah, and it's, to me then, it's talking about from being pregnant, from the early days when you're expecting and then managing expectations of how this is going to play out for you. Because I think that's a massive chunk of it.
But you also put it very positively. Like as soon as you call it, maternity mental health.
Yeah.
It's a positive space.
Yeah.
It's not a dark space. It's not a negative. You're not a failure. This is a process.
You take away the word depression instantly, which changes everything.
Yeah. Instantly.
And depression and anxiety, I think we're getting there. I feel like we've got more kind of light on it and wellness but I think there's also a flip side to that because we've got so much going on now, so many resources and so much information out there, that in itself is actually a bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like if you're in a dark space and you're like, okay, what do? Google.
I'm depressed.
Or go on Instagram and you're just bombarded with potential, resources. I usually use the term simple, sustainable self-care because I want people to understand that it's not. And I think as well, this industry has got a lot of high-end tickets and massive accountability. And for me, if you're in a space where brushing your teeth is too much, you're not accountable to sign up to a 12-week programme and pay thousands of bucks,
Yeah.
So I keep it simple, affordable, accessible. That is the premise of it.
Okay, we're going to get to all of that very shortly, but I'm going to jump on. Lily's normally like, let's take it back.
Let's take
So
it back. We've become very in sync.
That could be your thing. That's your little
my
tagline.
logo.
But no, literally, let's take it back.
Let's take
'Cause
it back.
you also threw in earlier as we were discussing that you're a hairdresser by trade, or you were a hairdresser.
I was a hairdresser for a long time.
And there's a very thick Scottish accent there as well, so you're clearly from Scotland.
Yes. I've been out of Scotland for 16 years now.
Wow.
But still have the
Scotland came
accent.
with you.
It did.
Yeah.
If you add wine or anything else, it gets worse. Trust me. Or if I'm with my own, like family, then it obviously gets thicker.
It's very true when I hang around like Manc people or Scousers.
It does
It's
come
like people
out,
are just like,
right?
what the hell?
You start using words that you wouldn't even use when you're at home, but just because you can, you've got this free space. But I've been out 16 years. I did 7 in Jakarta, Indonesia.
Wow.
Had a
I
salon
love that
there.
city.
It's bonkers,
It is
but it's
actually
brilliant.
mental.
It's
That was it,
brilliant.
because on the call we were talking about, I stayed in Megakuningan.
That's
I lived there for a year.
Yeah. And I was down in Kamang.
Yeah.
So what took you there?
So I was going to New Zealand.
As you do.
What was I then? I was like 30. So it was the old story, right? My ex and I had split and it was like, okay, is this my window of opportunity? And I wasn't a big traveller. We were talking earlier, you love travelling. I wasn't. I'm a home bird.
Okay.
And then you pick New Zealand, like one of the
furthest parts
parts.
away
I
from
know,
Scotland.
but I think it's because it was really windswept and interesting to do that. but they also spoke English. Culture-wise,
Yeah.
we were the same.
Well,
So it
there
was
is a
almost
whole
like
Australia
safety
before
net.
New Zealand, you know.
Right.
There's like a big, massive island.
we just fly over that.
Yeah, you know.
But it was like almost like a safety net. It was far and it was something wild for me.
From a
but
landscape point of view, I mean,
there
there's
was
a lot of similarities.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
very much.
But my dad had just moved. He was in Dubai. He had just moved to Jakarta. And he was like, okay, come and hang out and then go from here. So I had maybe 8 weeks just lying by the pool, drinking milkshakes, going out partying. Left there, went to New Zealand, and it was winter there. So it was absolutely freezing. I stayed with 2 friends. I had 2 friends there. So they were awesome. They gave me their spare
Can I
room.
just ask, colder than Scotland?
Aye, it was Baltic.
'cause
it
Scotland's
was like
cold.
the wall, but the wall was like damp.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Do you know what I mean? I was going to bed with a hat on, so I phoned Dad and I'm like, I'm really cold and I don't think this is where I want to be. And I was going through this whole, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And
So were you moving to New Zealand, or were
I was
you
going
just
to
doing
do
time?
6 months.
Okay.
That was the big plan. I was going to do 6 months and I was going to go home. And some of my mates in Scotland didn't come to my leaving party because they were like, she'll be back in a fortnight.
Yeah.
So went back to Jakarta and was really like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I just hung out and partied for a while at Dad's expense.
Thanks, Dad.
And then he came home from golf one day and went, right, I've got an investor. Do you want to open my shop? And I was like, okay. So we opened the salon and we had a 2-story salon for the next 7 years.
Wow.
Um,
But were you
So
in the...
were you?
Oh, go on.
Sorry,
I was gonna say, were you
a
in the...
hairdresser before then?
Yeah,
were you?
oh my God, we're asking the same question.
I know, this is
You were
ridiculous.
just asking them
We're freaking
quicker
each
than
other
me.
out.
you are doing this like
Yeah.
telepathic.
It's freaky.
We're in sync now.
So yeah, I was a hairdresser. So I had been doing like bits in people's houses and stuff, but that's no fun. I don't like
Yeah.
doing the mobile thing. So that's why we set up the salon.
And your
it
dad
wicked.
was also?
No, he's oil and gas. He was just money. He just put the money to it.
Yeah.
And I think it was just to give me
Bless
stuff
him.
to
He
do.
wanted to-
He wanted to
okay.
invest.
Give you something to do, I guess, and to help
and
support.
he stopped me
Plus, you get you
partying.
off the couch and stop him paying for everything.
Stop me partying. So yeah, 7 years I had the business there. And it was during that time I met my husband, right? I met him 4 years in. Stayed another 3 and then we left and went to Tivat, Montenegro.
Oh,
What made you do that?
quite different.
So
Yeah.
I think because we got engaged and started talking about starting a family, we were like, okay, there's nowhere to push like a buggy in Jakarta.
I mean, 'cause
you know.
like, yeah, I mean,
Well,
there's
there
no
is.
pavements.
You might just lose the child in the crowd.
There'd be in the back of a scooter or a bajai.
True story, actually.
Aye.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, we
Bonkers.
need to relocate. And we looked at the States because he's American.
Okay.
But visa stuff still wasn't happening. So we found ourselves sitting in Scotland. We'd had our wedding. We were like, what do we do now? And he got an interview for a job. And he said, I've got an interview for a job in Montenegro. And I was like, brilliant. Where's that? And he said, it's just across from Italy. So I was like, well, let's do it.
Yeah.
So we did. We had
For
6
someone
years.
who wasn't really into traveling and not
I
much of a
know,
traveler,
right?
you've done a lot.
Yeah, and
I
you
know.
stayed away from Scotland for a while then.
I know.
a
And then I've
number of
been here
years.
for 3 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right, so Montenegro.
Montenegro's beautiful.
It's on my list. It's on my list.
I loved it. But again, like your circumstances change, right? When it was just the 2 of us, it was fine. And there were things that didn't really come into our peripheral until we had our son. So things like the healthcare, it wasn't massively accessible. The closest hospital, if you needed emergency help, is like a 2-hour drive.
But your first child was in Montenegro.
So I had him in Scotland.
Got you.
And then we came back to Montenegro. But it was like, okay, I've got a wee boy, if he's a tree climber, he's going to break stuff and I've got to drive 2 hours to hospital.
Yeah.
So things like that started coming into play. And we had been there 6 years, it was like, okay, it's time for a shift again. And we both always said we wouldn't come to Dubai. I knew Dubai through my dad being here. None of us were drawn to it. But it was in the middle of the pandemic as well.
Got you.
So we were kind of going, do you know what? This is maybe an opportunity that's came up. We need to take and see how it goes. So we've been here 3 years now, and we're doing another year
Yeah.
at least.
So
yeah.
in the middle of all of this,
Yeah.
you had a baby in Montenegro in a place where the closest hospital was 2 hours away
Yeah.
and you were experiencing...
And I had postpartum. So I think I knew when I had him in Scotland that it was coming to kick my butt.
But how long were you in Scotland before?
So I flew back when I think I had maybe 3 or 4 weeks to go before he was due.
Towards the end of the pregnancy.
Towards the end, yeah. And then they kept bringing the date forward. They induced me because I had gestational diabetes.
Okay.
But I think that was my own fault because I kept eating Mr. Kipling French fancies. I think I gave myself diabetes.
Still have it now, or is it a temporary thing?
No, it's only when you're
It's temporary,
pregnant.
right?
Got you, okay.
But when you deliver the baby, you then have to get tested, and they test the baby too. So it
In
can
case.
be dangerous. Like,
Okay.
I'm laughing, but it can be detrimental. So, and because of my age, I was 41. So they were looking at these different aspects, and they were like, okay, we're going to induce you. So I was induced and then ended up having a section. I was in labour all night and nothing was happening, so I had a section. But we were cool, we were all right, you know, there was nothing. I mean, it wasn't the best night I've ever had,
Yeah.
you know. But I wouldn't have said that it was a traumatic experience. I was at home, I was surrounded, my family were there, you know, the nurses and the staff at the hospital were great. So nothing traumatic. And when he was born, there was, you know, that feeling of we weren't in our own house.
Yeah.
We were in a temporary accommodation. Kevin had to return to Montenegro for work. So all my kind of crying and emotion, we were putting down to that. It was circumstantial, and once we got back to being together, we would be okay.
Because how were you feeling at that time? You would cry
Oh my God.
for any
I'm
reason?
a crier.
Or...
I'm a crier anyway. Like, I cry most days. Like, I'm quite an emotional person. But this was like on another level. It was just, you just couldn't stop these tears. And then I think the thought process, I think expectation, I think when you sit down and work a lot of things out now, expectation is always something that you need to talk about, whatever the circumstances
The
are.
expectation on yourself?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, you know, whatever the situation is, you can always bring it back to an expectation perhaps not being met. Postpartum wasn't the first time that I'd experienced feeling depressed or feeling anxious. I think a lot of people, we have it at different times in our lives. I had had medication for that before, when I was in my 20s.
That was a very different period back then as well.
Yeah,
Mental health wasn't really discussed properly.
No, and it was very much you're not feeling great, okay, it's kicking on, right, there's some pills, off you pop, you'll be grand.
Take the pills, you'll be all right.
And I've got massive opinions about how long is this podcast? How long have we
45
got?
minutes.
Because when I get going,
It's all right.
You got about 45 minutes.
We get a signal. It's fine, and then we ignore them and keep going.
yeah, when they start like turning the lights
But
on in the building.
your tone completely changed when you started talking about that. Like, it just sort of dropped. Was it?
Yeah.
It's heavy.
It is heavy. I think it's, and I think that's the thing. Like, our mental and physical are attached. So I love that you've actually identified that, because it is. When you talk about a depression or something that's dark or troublesome or upsetting, like, our bodies change, right?
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of, when we're talking about exercising, that's why, because it is all
shifts
interlinked,
it,
but
yeah.
people have it as a separate entity,
Yeah.
and it's not a separate entity. So yeah, you know, it was.
But so, one that we had another guest who said, just simply going from having a natural birth to having to have a section, that on its own had a sort of negative impact on them.
her,
And you know, you're not a proper mother if you didn't give birth
Yeah.
naturally and all that. Did that come into it for you at all?
Do you know
Or
what?
were
It
you
really
okay?
did, and I was okay with it. And I do fully appreciate for a lot
Yeah.
of people. And again, this is expectation. Their expectation of their birth
Yeah.
journey. They have
a full book of how it should be going.
I do remember, like, you know, and I had said from the get-go, look, I am putting myself in the hands of the nurses and the staff. You know, I've done it for 40 odd years, so I'm good to take their guidance. Given the preference, I would have liked to have given birth in water. I like the idea of that. Maybe it's my star sign or something. Like the idea of it. But really, I was in their hands. But I do remember when I was in labour and I went into the labour wards and I was sitting on one of the big yoga balls. And I was like, okay, and I was having a wiggle and I was like, okay. And I had London Grammar playing because I had needed my tunes, I needed music. And I had a bottle of this lavender stuff that the lady in Montenegro used to use, my beautician that did my facials and stuff. So I was sitting there with my London Grammar and I'm sniffing my lavender and I'm looking at Kevin, my husband, and I'm like, I've totally got this. got this, babe. And he's like, good.
I'm all over it.
But fast forward, I had nothing. Right? I didn't have anything.
Not even began at that point, really.
Seriously. Ended up getting, the nurse was like, I think you're struggling a wee bit. Do you want something? And I was like, what have you got? She went, I've got diamorphine. I was like, okay, that's fine. Had the diamorphine and just went into this like back in the rave days, I guess, because I was like, this is brilliant. I feel so much better. And I'm going to Kevin, you should have some of this because
This is amazing.
And the nurse is like, yeah, no, he can't get this.
Yeah.
And you're
Stop
not
prescribe.
getting any more.
Yeah.
So yeah, a full night, a full shift in labour. And as I said, the nurse came round, or the midwife came round in the morning, and she said, what do you want to do? You're 1 centimetre dilated.
That's it.
That's it.
And you need to be normally, what, 10?
10.
10? Okay.
There was nothing was coming out.
And to get epidural, you got to be what, at least 6?
I don't even know.
Yeah,
I don't
5
know
or
either.
6, I
I've
think.
never given birth.
We'll just make it up.
We'll make it up. But basically,
You gotta be
you have to
somewhere.
get. You've got to
Yes.
be somewhere a lot
Yeah.
further, and to get to that point is a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Like women are phenomenal.
Oh, machines. Absolute machines. But she said, I think we should section. And I went, right, that's okay, And he came out
And you're comfortable with that decision?
Aye. My
Yeah.
first words, I still remember saying he's perfect. That was my
Oh.
first word.
So how did you feel at that moment when you saw your child for the first time?
Just amazing. I waited a long time, and I think that was the thing. Like the previous episodes of anxiety or depression, I actually thought that getting pregnant, that was my answer, because I had been maternal for so long that I thought I just need to have a wee baby. I just need to be in that space where I've got a wee family. That was like in my values. That was really important to me.
And it wasn't being met.
And it wasn't happening. So I kept thinking, that's why I have these dips. I'm just not living, the life that I want. So when I got pregnant, it was like,
This is it
okay,
now.
now we're winning.
Yeah.
Now we've got it.
Oh, geez.
You know?
And then you got postnatal.
But
But I think because I had it so built up. I had this expectation of how it was going to be, that of course the reality is totally different.
I want to dig a little bit
Go,
deeper
go.
into the experience, because
Yeah.
you see your child for the first time. Obviously, you've gone through a difficult labour, but you're really excited to see the child.
yeah.
Everything feels perfect.
Yep.
At what point does it start to not feel as perfect?
Maybe that night, because after he was delivered, I remember like being in the ward and the nurses come in and you got your toast and tea, and I got a custard cream because I was all right with the diabetes stuff now. So, and the nurse said, right, Nikki, I'll come back and I'll give you a wash down. And I went, can I not just have a shower? And she went, I don't know, can you stand? Because obviously with a section, you're
you
epidural,
can't.
right?
Yeah.
And I did. I stood up and Kevin helped and I went and had a shower. So I was like, we're doing okay.
Yeah.
And then that night, Archie was needing fed. And this was probably where I did, if I had any critique about the staff at the hospital, they were quite forceful when it came to breastfeeding.
I've heard
And
about
that I
this.
found that quite disturbing, because I had always said I wanted to express my milk so that Kevin could give him the bottle. That was our decision. But they were pretty pushy about trying to get him. So I tried it. I was trying to breastfeed, but he was upset. And it's, when people say, when you have a kid, it's like your heart walking about outside your body. I guess that's one of the only ways you can describe it. So even now, he's nearly
It's
6.
actually a beautiful way of describing it.
But when he's upset, I feel it.
Yes.
I don't feel like I'm giving him empathy or that I'm sympathetic.
You're actually
I
feeling it.
literally feel upset when he's upset, That's your connection. It's,
So your child was upset at the time because he couldn't
so
take the milk.
he was needing fed, basically.
They're hungry, and kids want to consume
And I was
lots.
so aware, because I was by this point in a ward with another maybe 5 mums and their new babies. So because he was screaming, I was so aware of upsetting them, people pleaser
that then
that I
stresses you
was.
even
I
more.
wasn't thinking about me, I was thinking about them and getting myself really stressed and worked up. And then because I couldn't settle him, I remember one of the nurses coming, and just the position that she put him in, he calmed down. So what that did was that fed that voice in my head. See, you're no good
That
at
you
this.
don't know what
Yeah.
you're doing there.
You're no good at this. And what you're going to do, you've had him now, you can't
Yeah.
send him back.
Because you've had
That was that inner voice, and that's the kind of cusp. I think that's the part of a lot of it over the years. I now understand it. I didn't
Yeah.
understand it in my 20s, that I had an inner voice that I was believing. You know,
That's self-doubt.
that saboteur,
Aye.
saboteur
She's
voice.
a
They're
bit.
very
And also
the
overthinking.
limiting
Yeah,
beliefs.
totally.
They're
I've been
horrible.
there.
But when we don't know, right?
Yeah.
And this is the thing, without having that, you know, and there were life coaches and stuff, but I was always like, it's airy-fairy, it's not my jam, you know. And it's not airy-fairy, it's actually science. And
Yeah.
we know now, you know, and when you start delving into that world and educating yourself and understanding yourself better, it's pretty mind-blowing.
It's got some fundamental.
It's wild.
What was the continuation of the journey? So you've had difficult birth, difficulty breastfeeding,
Yeah,
screaming child overnight, so you're concerned about other people.
yeah.
And then,
How'd you go to sleep that
yeah,
night?
how
I don't even
what
remember
happened?
if I did sleep. I remember them coming in and saying, because when I was going into labour, they gave us a private room so that Kevin could stay with me because we didn't have a house there, right? So
Okay.
on the circumstances, they were like, no, you can have that. So the nurse came in and she went, would you like a private room again? I was like, yes, please. So they put me back in and I got my shampoo out and got all set up.
You're like, I got this again.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, we'll be all right.
Lavender.
And you do, you know, you have to expect that emotion as well when you deliver, right? When you deliver a baby, nobody talks about the baby pinks. Right? They talk about the baby blues and
what's a baby's pink?
so the baby pinks are when you first deliver and it's actually like a euphoric state.
Okay.
Some people get really kind of hyper and because you've got your baby and, you know,
Makes sense.
but that's got
Well,
to
for every high,
There's a massive
there's
crash.
gonna
got
be
to
a-
come down, right? And baby blues are because your hormone levels that were elevated during pregnancy after delivery have dropped. You know, so and you've went through a physical. I mean, it is like you said earlier. Women are amazing, and they fucking are.
Yeah.
Like to deliver a kid is no mean feat. You know, it's you've made a person. You've grew organs and
Yeah.
eyeballs and stuff.
Huge.
But with those kind of peaks and troughs in emotion and hormone levels,
So you
were they
expect
consistent?
that.
Like, did that happen a lot?
No, it was. I feel like the early days there was a lot. It was very up and down because there was a lot of tears, but there was that elation that he was here. And
Yeah.
you know, when he came out, they had nicked him here because I didn't realise that when the midwives are doing a caesarean section, they can't actually see because they're working through these layers.
So many
Got
layers.
ya.
Right, so they caught him. It was the tiniest little cut, and he was fine. But I guess coming from the UK, and the UK is a massive like claim culture. Everybody wants to put in a claim to get a monetary, you know. So this midwife came, I don't know, 2 or 3 times to me, and she was like, "I am so sorry." And I said, "He is perfect. He's
Yeah.
fine. You've put a wee stitch. He's absolutely fine. Please don't worry about it.
Yeah.
You brought me my boy.
Yeah.
You know, he's healthy, he's safe. I'm healthy, I'm safe. Like it's fine." So you had these kind of ups and downs. You know, my family were all there. We were all excited. I'd finally had this wee person. You know, and then you're not sleeping.
When did you go home? How long were you in the
I
hospital?
stayed
for?
in hospital for another kind of 2 or 3 days.
Okay.
I was reluctant to go because I wanted to make sure that, you know, he was feeding.
You're afraid of
Yeah.
leaving
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
a lot of times new parents don't want to go home
especially
because it's like
you kind of move in, yeah.
And also because I guess like you're on your own when
Yeah.
you move away from the hospital environment, like
Yeah.
it's your
That's it,
responsibility
yeah.
now.
You're
It's
like, am
like,
I
this
gonna
is real.
break this baby?
yeah.
And did you feel that?
A little bit, yeah, because you've never done it before. Like even when you've had children in the family or whatever, that it's
Not the
completely
same.
different to having your own. You
Yeah.
know, once it's your own wee person, then it just changes everything. Like the trajectory of your life changes like that. The minute that wee person arrives, you know, you start thinking about your mortality. You start, like when I think about my behaviours in my younger years, I was a wild bugger. It's maybe a different podcast. You know, but then when you have this wee person, and I remember my sister saying that
Yeah.
when she had my nieces, you know, that your mortality comes into play more. You start
Of
thinking about that.
course.
So you almost generate a bit of anxiety
Yeah.
within yourself. Like, I need to keep myself
'Cause
safe
it's
now
no
because I
longer
need
just
to.
Because
about
now you're
you.
responsible for somebody else
Aye.
and keeping them safe.
You know, and a lot of like the work I do, I talk about the dads as well because a lot of this is always focused on mums and
Yeah.
birth mums. But you know, if you're a step parent, if you're a foster, adoptive, a father, whatever it is, whatever change that is, where you've brought a little person into your world,
Yeah.
it impacts everybody. You know, and I work a lot talking about the dads because I think that the dads get kind of dismissed.
Yeah, they get forgotten and it's
They
unfair.
do, and I I often look back on like my own husband, you know, he had just become a new dad, super hands-on, so he was getting up through the night, then he had to work, and that financial burden weighed a bit heavier on him because he was now the sole breadwinner.
And he's responsible for everybody.
So he was looking after me and Archie and the dog, you know, and then he was coming home from work and his wife was pretty broken some days.
So after you brought baby Archie home, how long after you brought him home did Kevin have to leave and go back to Montenegro? And then how long after that did you follow him?
So Kevin must have left like a week or 2 weeks after, and then I followed. Archie was only like 4 weeks old when we flew. It was like as soon as we could.
It's just a fairly short period of time after giving birth.
We flew. My stepmom flew with us.
Okay.
She was there, so she flew with us to Montenegro.
Because that's a big deal, getting on a plane with a 4-week-old baby.
Aye.
And feeling the way you were feeling.
Yeah. But I don't know if at that point, because I was up and down, like I was...
Didn't quite know.
I was all right. Because
Okay.
I was like, we're going home and we're going to see your dad.
So when did it hit?
Again, it wasn't consistent, so it would come and go.
Okay.
So when it did kick in, you know, and I was really tearful and I think as well, like people used to say things like, you need to just calm down and don't stress, because you're stressed, the baby's picking up on that.
Yeah.
And I know
You're
that
like,
they're
gee,
trying to
that's
be
constructive.
helpful,
Thank you.
right? But it would just compound that I was screwing it up, you know, that my emotional state was going to impact him, so I had to stop it. But I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't realise the elements that were in play, and that actually it was because I needed to just cut myself a break. Like when I look back now, if I, you know, when we talk about if you could go back and speak to yourself, I would go back and go, will you calm down? Just cut yourself a break. You have got this.
And were you being unnecessarily harsh on yourself all the time?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It seems it's quite common, I think, isn't it, in women?
That's why I like talking to people when they're pregnant.
What was the
and
self-talk?
That I wasn't very good at it. That I, you know, I've got a thing about cleaning, right? I'm always cleaning and tidying, and like people would say, you need to calm down with that. And I'd be like, no, because I needed the environment to be. And actually, I think that's important, because people will tell you to disregard that. And I don't think you should. I think you just need to figure out better ways of managing it. But stop
Did it become
telling
slightly
people
obsessive?
Aye,
Or like
because it's a
overly?
control.
Got you.
It's a
If
control.
you can't
It's
control
like,
this, you're controlling that. Okay.
yeah. And I mean, Archie was good. Like, he fed well. There was nothing that was bad there, you know. But I think, like I said earlier, I think it was going actually back to my own internal voice that had been there before. I had obviously suppressed at different times in my life. And then becoming a mum, my expectation was that was going to heal me. I was
And it
going to be completely happy. But I think that's such a massive expectation on yourself when you're not meeting your own human needs.
Yeah.
Because you then immerse into looking after his needs, which meant, and this is where it gets really simple, I wasn't listening to music that I like. I wasn't reading stuff that I liked. Everything was about him, right? And that's a natural thing. But when you ignore your own needs, that spiral keeps going. And now when I look back, I think one of the biggest things was my growth, right? When we talk about our growth, I wasn't studying, I wasn't listening to podcasts that challenged me, educated me, entertained me even. You know, I just wasn't feeding those parts of myself anymore. I just didn't realise it.
And so you didn't know at the time.
I just didn't know.
You just forgot about them almost.
I just didn't know how important they were.
So what was rock bottom for you? Like, at what point?
There was, you know, I would say to Kevin, do you think I need to speak to somebody? And he's like this big, cool, calm guy. And he'd be like, no, you're getting better. Because, as I say, it wasn't consistent.
Yeah.
And then one day he came home and I just lost my shit. And I was like, dude, if this was you, I would have dragged your ass to the doctors ages ago. Like, and I felt disconnected. I would feel kind of surreal. Like I was watching my life. I was doing all the things I needed to do, but I wasn't feeling that I was living in it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't experiencing the joy that I should have been experiencing. The other thing was that when you Google postpartum depression, right, one of the main symptoms that they will talk about is not connecting with your baby. I was the opposite. I felt like I said earlier, if he cried, I felt upset.
Yeah.
Like, I felt this overwhelming love for him. So I kept thinking, well, it can't be that then, because I don't feel that I'm not connected to him, but I wasn't connected to myself. And that was the problem, you know. It wasn't that I wasn't connecting with my wee boy. I'd lost the connection with myself.
You lost yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and I needed to figure that out. And I had a good friend, and it was her that said, listen, I know a counsellor in the UK, she'll do a Zoom call, maybe just try it. And that's when everything changed.
And when you had that conversation, what happened?
I felt like I had just went on and blurted. And
The floodgates came out open.
And I felt like I made no sense.
Yeah.
You know, if I was to think about that conversation, I thought it was just gobbledygook.
Yeah.
But she sent me an email the next day, and she had pinpointed all the parts that she had picked up on that were impacting me. So for her, it was simple. And that's what I do now. It's like I can sit in a room with mums and go, that. I can pick up on it because you've got perspective. You know, but when it's you don't see the wood for the trees. You
can't see
know,
anything.
right? You can't.
No.
Well, you were looking to Kevin. Like that's a bit that I found so intriguing. You go, the day that Kevin came home and you're a complete mess, and you're like, dude, if it was you, I would have dragged you to see someone ages ago. And all I kept thinking in my head was, then why didn't you do that for yourself?
Yeah, because you don't, do you?
No.
Because you can't see it. You don't have that.
You need the
So I
support
guess
from
I was
somebody
looking
else to
for
do
him
it.
to have that
Yeah.
perspective. I was looking for him to
validate
manage it or something, because I didn't know how to manage it. I didn't know where this was going to go. And I think when you kind of put your hand up and acknowledge it, it makes it real. I think there was a lot of... And, you know, being overseas, not having that proximity, I think if I had been at home, my besties and my mum...
Would have dragged you.
They would have been on top of that. But when
did you
we
not
were...
speak to them?
I did, but I was also putting a face on because I didn't want to worry them.
Yeah.
I didn't want them to judge me. I didn't want them to think that I couldn't do this, because that's what my voice was saying.
I was saying judgment's quite a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because judgment is quite prevalent within pregnancies
And
and
that's
new
what we're
mums.
hearing. Like self-judgment and fear of judgment has stopped so many women from reaching out and saying, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
Like,
Also judgment in society.
but that's what I mean. Like it's sad that so many women suffered in silence and on their own because of judgment. And it's that's why we're so happy to be talking about this topic and putting it out there, because
And it is, and it's that like turning point. You know, when I spoke to that counsellor, what actually happened there was I had a safe space to get it out, and I think we minimise how important that is in a recovery or a healing process, is just having a safe space where no one's going to judge you. You're not going to worry them. You're not going to burden them, because it's a double-edged sword. It's, you know, the judgment thing or the advice. Family and friends, we all want to give advice and opinions. But, you know, when you go into an environment where it's like, okay, this is a time where you can say whatever you want.
Yeah. You're free from judgment.
Family and friends, even if they don't judge, they have their own opinion.
Of course.
It's not really objective.
Right. So
feedback.
when you sit with a life coach, because I've gone through the process as well, got the situation. The whole thing is, as coaches, is you're not there to tell them what to do. You're there to hold space for them.
Yeah.
And that makes all the difference. And I was the same as you. Like when I went to do the certificate, I'm like, oh, this is all like just fluffy duffy bullshit. And once it went through the fundamentals, I'm like, oh shit. Okay, now I get it. Now I get it. There is, but I also don't like that life coachy fluffy wording of it. It's not that.
No, and I think, and I do, I understand the stigma that goes with, you know, there's two sides to this. Like sometimes I get pissed off as well though when people are like, oh, have you got a hustle? Oh, everyone's a coach. And I'm like, do you know what? I could go and make money tomorrow cutting hair in Dubai in a heartbeat, right? I've spent the last 2 years building this business and continue to do so because what I do is fucking important.
Yeah. And also because you've
Do you know
gone
what I mean?
through that journey.
So see when someone says, oh, hustle, oh, you're a life coach, I'm like, you have no idea the impact that someone can have on another person's life and how valuable that is.
Yeah.
Because that was, for me, it was a life coach. After speaking to the counsellor, a life coach friend of mine was holding a retreat and it was like 10 minutes from our house. So Kevin was like, go. And then if you need to come back for the baby, we're 10 minutes. It's fine, you know. So I did. Again, that safe space, and that completely changed my life.
Yeah.
You know, on a personal level. And that's how it started. It was to help me. It was to support me. But after starting that kind of journey, I went home to Kevin. I had been out walking. I always walked the same way in Tivat in Montenegro. It's like you go round the harbour and it's on the water and the mountains are there. It's absolutely beautiful. And I remember sitting down and just remembering to breathe. And I was like, I'm going to be all right. And Archie was sleeping in his buggy and I'm like, we're all right. We've got this. And I thought, I can't walk away from this. 18 months, times where it was bloody hell. And I went home and I said to Kevin, I want to do something with this. I want to help other people. I can't be the only person. And I think I'm quite a strong character and strong personality. So if I was in that state, there must be people out there who are really struggling.
Yeah.
I need to do something. And that's when we started.
When you said you were at the lake and after 18 months, you told yourself you got this. Was that the first time when you really authentically felt you had it?
Felt, I think I had hope. I don't know that I had everything, but I had hope. I had light again where I was like, we're going to be all right. That kind of darkness had just shifted, you know, and it's not to say that it's not come back. I still have times, even now, but I have a different way of honouring those times. I think we need to stop resisting and putting emotions into brackets. These are positive, these are negative. No, they're not. They're not. We're human beings, you know, and we experience a range of emotions, and it's how we navigate them. It's how we address them. Stop resisting them and trying to make them go away. That's not healthy either.
Yeah.
And that's when I get upset with the coaching world, where they make claims that they can find solutions to your problem and they can remove your problem. No, they can't.
The problem never goes away.
Yeah, but
they can hold your hand and guide you,
Yeah.
but don't make claims that you can change somebody's life. It's up to them to change their life.
But
you know,
even that narrative is negative.
yeah,
You know, you're already saying you have a problem. It's like it's life.
yes, it
This
is.
is life.
Yeah.
Life's going to have ups and downs. Life's going to have...
And it's a journey.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
So it's not a problem.
It's not linear. It
And
doesn't start and finish.
The parts that are tough, like I now understand, are the bits that build resilience in us and make us fight harder at times and find that inner strength that we talk about. Like, that's because we have to experience the shit bits to be able to do that. And now I play things completely differently. So it's not that I don't have days and that inner voice doesn't raise her head sometimes. But
What do you say to her when she rocks up?
let's get ice cream.
You have to play with it.
Like, you know, and I do, because having, you know, the last 2 years building this as a business, it's obviously really heartfelt for me. It's part of my life now. So it's like this journey that I'm on. So it's still personal for me, and it's the business side of it.
It's a great opportunity for that saboteur voice to really have a field day with you, right?
And being in this demographic as well, Dubai is a massive hustle.
Yeah.
There's an energy here, and there's so many people here that are like, you know, I don't know, the business world is crazy. So it's brilliant. It can elevate you and give you leverage. But if you allow your inner voice to come in, it can really kind of bring you down too, you know.
I'm going to ask a slightly maybe random question, but it actually makes
Random.
sense. So you had those kind of feelings, or not kind of, you had those feelings once you given birth that, you know, you were not good enough, you couldn't do this, that, you know, nothing you could do was good.
Yeah.
Do you have similar feelings, or did you have similar feelings when you started your business?
Absolutely.
Because it was your new baby.
Your new baby, yeah.
And still do. Still have times. But then, you know, I check back in with myself. And I think that's something that we all need to do, is that often we'll look at our circumstances and look at what we've not yet achieved and what we've not yet done, you know, because I've got plans going round in my head all the time.
But look at what you've done.
But we forget to look at what we have achieved and what we have done. Even this, like sitting talking to you guys on, you know, recording my voice 2 years ago, I sat in the stairwell in our house with my laptop going to make my first kind of video. Because I'm good at talking to people. I could go into a bar or sit in a restaurant or whatever. I'm sociable. But recording my voice or standing on a stage or any of that kind of public speaking part wasn't something I was comfortable with. And I sat in the stairwell with my laptop. I made Kevin take Archie out into the car because I didn't want him to hear me. And I was recording, deleting. Like, it was a nightmare. But then I realised that my message, what I want to do with this, was way, way more important than my fear. So I just had to address that fear. And I started building that muscle and recording myself talking or videos. And then it was stages and microphones and whatever. And when I do that reflection, I'm like, no, I'm doing something with this. This is important. And when I get the messages from people who say, Nikki, you were a wee light in a dark time. And, you know, that's someone that maybe I spoke to once a year ago.
Yeah.
And I get these wee messages and they're the fuel that keep me going.
With that change you've made.
Yeah.
That impact.
And that's all it is. It's so simple. And that was what it was for me. I just needed somebody to help me turn my head from there to there.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about golf, right? It's like if you keep missing the fairway, you don't do like a 360 turn, a 180 turn. You adjust.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden your shot's different. And that is what it's like with your headspace as well. We look for big, groundbreaking, whatever. Just deal with the simple stuff and you'll be...
It's funny because oddly I was having the same debate and conversation with my personal trainer the other day. I'm just like, but you need to... The thing is, are you going to let your fear get in the way of what you want? And I go, and sometimes you just need to be able to separate the two things. And he's like, what do you... I go... He's like, oh, you know, like I used to be an incredibly shy person. And the way I got over things is because it's the work. You know, so because it's the work, it's not about me, it's the work.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah. And I go, no, it was literally that simple. I go, one day I took my focus from here to here and it all changed.
Yeah.
Change that slight perspective.
And then you start building that muscle. Like once you start on that path, then you can develop that skill. Yeah. And again,
it's a choice.
It's about our expectations of ourselves. Like, are we going into this expecting to be Oprah or are you just going out to share a message? And if one person is impacted and gets help, then we're doing something that's pretty cool, right?
But it's choices. When you realize it's choices.
Yeah. Your decisions.
You have more, you know, there's a lot more control there and there's a lot more light there. It's like, what am I choosing today?
Yeah.
It's not, life is no longer happening to me, I'm happening to life.
Yes. Yeah. And there's so many elements that help you with that. Like I had this transition that I wasn't massively aware of at the time, right? But I used to like listen to Damien Rice and quite kind of chilled music. I used to read, I called them domestic thrillers. You know, somebody murdered somebody next door, right? And watch like car crash TV. You know, it was always, I always went to the darker. And then one day I had started all of this kind of journey and helping myself and reading and what have you and studying. And I went to put on music and I think I must have went for something like Damien. And I was like, oh, sweet Marie, that would... And I was like, oh, this is quite interesting. And now, like, I've got a playlist that is purely, you know, to elevate my mood, to make me feel a bit better. And I've put it on my Instagram to share with people because I always talk about the power of music.
Yeah, it's true.
And I was like, I'm talking about this, but I'm not sharing it. So I've shared it. And one of my ex-school friends from like 30 odd years ago sent me a message and she went, I've been playing it in the car. And her 13-year-old daughter was like, Mum, what's that playlist? That's really good.
Yes.
There you go. You got
Winning.
it.
Still cool.
So
we're going to wrap up.
Yeah.
What's next, Nikki?
I just want to keep going with this. I just want to get it out to normalise these conversations because that's all it is, you know, is normalising it and that it doesn't have to be the dark, massively depressed. It's just about navigating a wee change in your life. So when people say to me, oh, can I speak to you because it's been 6 months? I'm like, I don't give a shit if it's like day one or, you know, your kid's 10. If you feel you need a bit of support, phone me.
Yeah.
You know, let's have a consultation. Let's chat and see if I'm the person that can help you. And if I'm not, now I've got an arsenal of people that I know that I can signpost.
Yeah.
But the heart of it is all the same. It's like we just all need to back each other up, man.
Yeah.
Very true.
You know?
I think that's a really nice way to end it.
Great way to end
Nikki,
it.
thank you so much for joining us. It was a
Thank
very
you for
beautiful
having me.
conversation. Thank you for
much.
sharing that with us.
Welcome to Rooted Within with Lili and Dan, a podcast that shines a spotlight on positive change makers sharing their stories of legacy, inspiration, and impact.